What if your life was a movie? And what if somewhere out there, a theater full of strangers had been watching it from the beginning? Every awkward conversation, every bad decision, every person you should have walked away from, every opportunity you almost took, every excuse you've repeated so many times it started sounding like the truth. If they were watching your story up to this point, what would they be screaming at the screen right now? Think about it for a second. What would they be begging you to do? Would they tell you to take the risk or to stop waiting? Would they tell you to move on? Or to finally say the thing you've been rehearsing in your head for years? It's an interesting question because audiences are usually very good at seeing the obvious. A character spends 2 hours chasing someone who doesn't love them back. The audience sees it. A character keeps returning to the same mistake over and over. A character is clearly miserable but refuses to leave. The audience sees it all. Everyone in the theater knows exactly what's happening, except the character, because they're too busy living the story to actually see the story. And that's true for us too. One of the strangest parts of being human is that we can often recognize patterns in everyone else's life while remaining completely blind to our own. You can watch your friend make the same mistake 6 times and know exactly how the 7th attempt will end. You can predict the outcome of a situation from miles away. You can tell someone they're settling. You can tell someone they're afraid. You can tell someone they're wasting years waiting for a version of reality that isn't coming, and then somehow become completely incapable of applying that same clarity to yourself. That is because we experience our own lives from the inside. We don't see the entire plot. We only see today's scene. We don't know where the story is heading. We only know what happened this morning. We only know the message that wasn't answered, the meeting that didn't go well, the thing we wish we had said, the thing we're afraid to do tomorrow. The audience gets the luxury of perspective. We get uncertainty. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once wrote that life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. It's one of those quotes that sounds simple until you really sit with it. Because that's exactly the problem. Understanding arrives late. Patterns become obvious after they've happened. The lesson appears after the mistake. The meaning shows up after the experience. Almost every major realization in life comes with terrible timing. You understand the relationship after it's over. You understand your parents after you've spent years resenting them. You understand yourself after becoming someone different. Which raises another question. If your future self was sitting in that theater, watching the movie of your life right now, what would they be yelling? What would the version of you from 10 years in the future be trying desperately to tell you? Maybe they'd tell you to relax. Maybe they'd tell you that the thing keeping you awake at night won't matter. Or they'd tell you to appreciate people while they're still around. Maybe they'd tell you to stop treating your life like a rehearsal. A lot of people move through life as though the real story hasn't started yet. The real career, the real relationship, the real version of themselves. Everything feels temporary. Everything feels like preparation. But imagine watching a movie where the main character spends the entire runtime preparing to live. At some point, the audience would start getting frustrated. Because preparation isn't the story. The story is happening now. The conversation you're avoiding is part of the story. The uncertainty, the mistakes, the boring Tuesday afternoon, the waiting, they're all part of the story. Life doesn't begin after you figure everything out. Life is the thing that's constantly happening. And maybe that's why this question feels so uncomfortable. Because sometimes we already know what the audience would be screaming. Sometimes we know immediately. The answer arrives before the question is even finished. We know the phone call we're avoiding. We know the decision we've postponed. We know the truth we've been carefully walking around. We know the chapter that ended months ago while we keep rereading the last page. We know the difficult part isn't awareness. The difficult part is action. Because action changes the story, and every change introduces uncertainty. Every meaningful decision requires giving something up. The familiar version of your life, the predictable version, the safe version, the version where nothing changes. Every great story contains a moment where the character has to leave something behind. A place, a belief, a fear, a dream, a version of themselves. And from the audience's perspective, that moment always seems obvious. Of course they should leave. Of course they should move forward. Of course they should take the leap. But the character doesn't know what happens next. The character only knows they're standing at the edge of something unfamiliar, just like us. Maybe that's why courage is so rare. Courage isn't certainty. Courage is moving anyway. And maybe that's what the audience understands that we sometimes forget. The goal of a story was never to avoid change. The goal was always transformation. No one watches a movie hoping the main character stays exactly the same. We watch because we want to see them grow. We watch because we want to see them become someone new. Maybe we should want the same thing for ourselves. So let's go back to the question. If your life was a movie and people were watching up to this point, what would the audience be screaming at the screen for you to do? Whatever answer came into your head first, you should probably pay attention to it.
Welcome to Noema. Subscribe for more philosophy, psychology, and beautiful existential crises every week.